Hi, my name is Barbara Newman, and I first want to take the opportunity to thank you for having me. This is such a wonderful show highlighting the creatives of the Berkshires, which is really, we walk in the footsteps of so many brilliant writers and painters and theater people and musicians, and coming here inspired me to find my creative muse in nature. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and how I went from being a collaborative creator to a solo creator, because I think it was just my trajectory. I've always been a storyteller. I began working in the advertising world in New York City. I was a creative director for an agency on global brands and always worked with a lot of people. I loved the ad world because it was an intersection of art, commerce, and psychology, so I got a chance to sort of explore all of those areas. It was almost a little bit of anthropology with art thrown in. And for me, it was wonderful to sort of hone my creative skills with other people. And so I was copy, and I always worked with an art director, so she would be the visual person and I would be the word person, but a lot of times that overlapped. And it also introduced me to, I had the opportunity to travel the world, which inspired me in other ways, and we went on shoots and we did casting and editing. I loved being in the editing room. I loved working with directors. I loved coming up with jingles and then going into the studio and working with the musicians. So it was very, very collaborative, and I loved it, and I did it for 20 years. And I still freelance from time to time because I guess that kind of creative energy is in my blood. It'll never go away. But something happened, and I think that being creative, one has to be curious and be a river and sort of go with the flow of life and go with the little taps on your shoulder that sort of inspire you to maybe do something else. So I did something else. I was listening to NPR, and there was a woman was being interviewed from the National Cowgirl Museum and Hall of Fame in Fort Worth, Texas. And I was completely blown away that there were cowgirls and that there was actually a museum that focused on these very strong, brave, and courageous women who helped shape the history of our country. And I was very inspired by one particular soundbite. And it's amazing what one small thing can do, change your life. One woman said she had unbelievably trained 36,000 and taught 36,000 women and girls how to ride horses at a camp in Texas. And she said at 101 years old, you have to saddle your own horse. And I had to pull over. I really had to pull over. And I had to ask myself what that meant to me. And it was all about being strong and resilient and standing on your own 2 feet. What a beautiful metaphor. And I had a 16-year-old daughter at the time, and I wanted her to saddle her own horse and live more courageously in the world. I wanted her friends to saddle theirs, and I wanted to saddle mine whether I rode a horse or not. So that piece of inspiration led me to leave New York for Montana. I quit my job. I hung up my red high heels, and I traded those shoes in for cowboy boots, and I went on a quest to find the spirit of the American cowgirl, and I began to do a documentary about their lives. I was out west, and one thing always leads to another. I think creative people really follow the breadcrumbs, so to speak. And when I was out west, I fell in love with the land in a way that I had never felt before. I felt a part of it. And I was inspired by the red rock and by the mountains and by the biodiversity and nature and how these women really cared for the land and became stewards of the land. And that stuck with me. And so when my funding for the rest of the documentary, we were planning on doing a 4-part series that included what women of the West had contributed to and have contributed to art and music and photography. There's just such a wide range, writing, all of these women writers from the West. And of course there was ranching and rodeo. But what I found in talking with these women was a side of myself that I had never known. I found a strength in myself. And that led me to my next project. When the funding was put on hold for the film Cowgirls Are Forever, I really didn't know what to do. And then I literally had a dream. And I dreamt that I was standing in the desert with an animal skin on my back, and my feet were inside the logo of the Cowgirls Are Forever project. And there were mountains in the background and sand as far as the eye could see, and the colors of the sky was almost like, the purples and the oranges and the sunset, and it was just magnificent. And I am standing in this mandala of my project, and the wind comes, this wild storm comes, and it whips around, and it literally lifts the logo up, which was a circle, and it comes down next to me in another form. And it was in the form of a book. So I listened to that message. You can't not listen to something like that. When it taps you on the shoulder, it's sort of this God wink, and I'm like, oh, okay, so I guess I'm supposed to write a book. Well, I'm a writer. I've written scripts before, and I've written TV commercials. I can write a book, but I didn't know what I wanted to write about. And I knew it wasn't a book about cowgirls. So I thought about it, and what came to me, I do morning pages every day. I don't know if, I think that's something a lot of people do. It was inspired by Julia Cameron and The Artist's Way. And so I wake up in the morning, every morning to this day, and I write 10 minutes of freehand in my morning pages. And it's amazing. You just dump you clear your mind, and you dump and you journal, and somebody is going to have to burn these. I've already thought about who that person might be. But in the journaling are kernels and nuggets and pieces of inspiration that I've always been able to use somewhere else in my life. And I started thinking about, well, if I'm going to write a book, what do I want to write a book about? What do I care about? What really is a passion of mine that I can help to translate into a story that has meaning for both me and for the reader? And so I'm very interested in the environment. I am concerned about the environment, where things are going, where they've been going. I believe that in order to want to protect the natural world, you have to fall in love with it. So I've said, well, okay, so how is this going to unfold? And I'm going to show you some vision boards. These images just started coming to me. And it just happened to be my creative process. I didn't think about it. It just sort of happened. And again, I listened. So I followed the path and the breadcrumbs. So I wrote a book called The Dreamcatcher Codes. It's a young adult eco-fantasy. It came out in 2019, just before a pandemic hit. And it took 7 years from idea to completion to a published novel. It's just a long time to live in solitude as a writer, but I'll talk about that in a minute. The book is about 4 young girls, the age of 14, and they come together from the 4 directions, from north, south, east, west. And they're very different, they're very diverse, and they're powered by earth, air, fire, water. And they're on a quest to find an ancient crystal, a piece of an ancient crystal that was stolen by a giant raven. And this piece of crystal holds the codes of nature and is the key to the planet's survival. Now, I have never written a fantasy. It probably was a difficult first book to write, but this was my calling. And I think that as creatives, we listen to our calling because it's passion. And so this took everything that I really care about, our earth, the natural world, and it also brought together my advocacy for young girls to find their vital voices and their place in the world. So the book builds cultural bridges, unity, and hope while illuminating climate change and showing ordinary girls doing heroic things. I would not call them superheroes, but they have that essence of cowgirl spirit. So the cowgirl spirit that I fell in love with when I was working on the film, that thread was brought through to this book. So I'll talk to you a little bit about the creative process and the images that started coming to me. So I'm going to stand up. I hope I do this gracefully and show you what my vision board looked like. And it's funny because I had this plastered all over my office. And my son walked in and he goes, "Oh, Mom, are you writing a graphic novel?" And I said, "No, but I could, but I think I like words too much. But maybe it could be adapted to a graphic novel." And I can talk about that in a little bit. But these were the images that just came to me. And I would go through and I would do my research. What am I writing about? What am I inspired by? I'm inspired by the sacred geometry of nature. I'm inspired by quantum physics. So here are images. This is the flower of life. And in the dream catcher that I write about, the web of design is the flower of life. And it's all about symbols and symbolism. So here are some, this is a falcon, and this is there are a lot of animal spirits in this story. The girls are guided by dream catchers and crystals and ley lines in the earth and plant medicine, all of the things that I've studied over the years and dabbled with a little bit have been a part of this story. So and then this is place, this is place. This became their cave where the girls stay and decompress after a very dangerous journey. They're on this adventure. The horses fly. They have eagle feathers for manes. So I was taken into this fantasy world. I don't even know how I got there, honestly. I just allowed it to happen. I allowed it to happen, and every morning I would wake up and say to myself, what is today going to bring? And I really didn't know. And I would almost meditate and ask for what was going to come next. That was part of my creative process. Trust was a big part of it. And so this was place. And this was the good horse. And this was the evil horse. But you know what? I didn't have an evil horse in the story. But these are things that just inspired the writing. And then I thought about, well, what are these girls going to look like? and Wonder Woman always inspired me for the Cowgirl movie because she had a lasso, and it was the golden lasso of truth. So at some point I thought, well, are these girls going to be superheroes, cowgirl superheroes? And then I let go of that idea because I felt there was an inauthenticity to it. And it led to this cover with a girl in the desert, which was really me, standing on the desert with my feet inside my mandala, and a dream catcher with the flower of life and orbs and magic. So she's going into a portal. She's the leader. What I chose to do is, as a solitude, a writer is a very solitary endeavor. I would say that completely different from my world of advertising, where I had people and collaborators and editors and directors, and everybody was contributing to the whole, which was wonderful. But sitting and writing a book is a very different experience, and my collaborators actually became my characters. And in order to get to know my characters, I would like take them out on walks, and I would take them on dates and lunch dates, and I would, for the mentor, which is the mentor for the girls, the earth teacher, for these guardians of the earth, I went to her house for lunch, and I opened the door, and through the objects in her space, I discovered who she was, right? So there were all of these sort of things that I engaged with to help me not feel so alone and to learn my characters. And it's interesting that my characters, I call this book my love letter to Mother Earth and all of her daughters, and those characters were with me every single day. So was I really alone? Was I solo? Was I flying solo? Was I in solitude? Yes and no. Part of what I had to do in order to write this book about, a real love letter to Mother Earth was go and commune with the earth in a way that I never have. So I had to also go out of my comfort zone, because that was what was required of these characters. They were on a dangerous mission to find a missing crystal that was stolen by a giant raven. And, clouds become these fire dragons and create these storms and whirlpools and floods and all of the things that really represent climate change and big business and greed. And so I had to get out of my comfort zone too. So I grew up in New York. I've lived in pretty much cities all of my life, except for when I moved here, which gave me new life, completely new life. The Berkshires just has been such a healing place for me, I think for many of us, because we are immersed in the arts and immersed in nature. But I had to learn a new kind of nature. I had to find my nature, which transformed me as a woman. So I did these solo hikes in the Southwest, and I'll never forget, I went to Ghost Ranch in New Mexico, which is where Georgia O'Keeffe painted. A beautiful, beautiful place. Obviously, it was very inspiring to her. And many artists go there to do their work now. And it is open to the public. And I went to the desk and I said, I'd like to take a hike today. And he said to me, okay, and he took out his map, and in a giant pink magic marker, he drew a circle, and he said, this one's easy. And I looked at him and I said, no, you see that? I want to climb that. And he looked at me like, oh my God, this woman is out of her mind. And he said, there's nobody on that mountain right now. There's nobody there. I said, good. I said, will I get cell phone service? He said, yes. I said, okay, if I'm not back by 5:30, send somebody for me. Well, this was not something I ordinarily would be able to do. I took 4 Advil before I went. I had my water bottles, and I'm talking to my body, telling it, asking it to cooperate, and that I can do this. And then I get to the head of the trail, and I see a little tiny ant. And this ant has the weight of 1,000,000 ants on its back, and it's just going up and up and up the hill. I said, thank you. Thank you for showing me what perseverance looks like. Now I can go up the mountain. And I did. And it was hard, but it was beautiful. And one of my characters is Native American. She's a Lakota girl. And on the side of the rocks, I would see these faces of, these beautiful Native American faces of a woman, a boy, a chief, an eagle. And these are the kinds of things that took me all the way through every solo hike that I made. And I got to the top of this mountain, and there was a hawk that just sat with me. It was extraordinary. And I had run out of water, and it was hot, and I was on my way down, and I don't know what possessed me, but I looked at my arm, and I started licking the salt off. How did I know to do that? How did I know that I would get energy doing that? And I felt like all of the ancestors were with me on this journey, and I was writing a lot of Native American folklore. I did a lot of research. I spoke to a lot of indigenous people, Lakota people. If I was going to write this story, I had to get it right, so that's a whole other thing. But it was quite spectacular, and so that was part of my journey. I went to the high desert in Arizona, and I slept under the stars without a tent. Magnificent, scary as all hell. Because I knew there were snakes, and I knew there were scorpions, and I knew there were javelina, and I knew that, wow, there were a mountain lion and all of that, but no, I had to do this. And again, magnificent. And I really got to taste the Milky Way. It was so close. It was right there. I could almost touch it. So all of these trips were part of my research, and they all made it into the book. And a lot of it was solo. I had to do this on my own. It transformed me as a writer, as a woman. And I think, how lucky am I to have had the courage to do that. If I had not started writing this book, I don't think I would have gone on those journeys. And so, and really embraced the solitude and the messages that I heard from that hawk, from those people in the mountain, from the winds, from the ant, from the animals. And so that was the biggest gift of all in writing this book. And I'm really proud to say that it's won a lot of awards. And the award I think that is the most meaningful to me, well, there are two. One is the Nautilus Award, and that is for books that help make the world a better place. And, it is my hope that my young readers, and I actually have a reading club with women in their 70s, so who knew? I'm writing 14-year-old characters, but they saw themselves in this character, and they're also giving it to their granddaughters and daughters. And it is just my hope that my reader sees the natural world with new and wondrous eyes so that they fall in love and protect it. Look at the sacred geometry in a zinnia. Look at the mandala that the pufferfish, makes in the sand on the bottom, which really is a nest for the female egg so that the currents don't move it away. Look at the coral reefs. Look at the trees. Fall in love, because when you fall in love, you protect it. So I'm just going to do a small reading of the opening of this story, and then one of the stories of the girls. There are 4 of them. One is from South Dakota. She's Lakota. One is a biracial Jewish girl from New York, and her power is air. I have a girl from Nambe, New Mexico, who she is the great-granddaughter of a Mexican woman who gives her an ancient and magical guitar is passed down to her, and it has 7 strings, and the 7th string is the song of the earth, And then I have a girl from the West whose name is Yue, which means moon in Chinese, and she is adopted. And so I wanted all of my readers to see themselves somewhere in this and to know that we are not separate from each other, and we are not separate from the earth. We are her and she is us. So I'll give you a little taste. This is the opening, and it is called Lascaux. We join this story in the moment that the world's first painting of a horse meets its destiny, which is to say that we join an ancient story, a story that travels like a talisman through time into the hands of a woman named Sophia Rose. That painting on the walls of a cave in France shows a wild mane, a strong neck, a lean body outlined in black, legs in motion, hooves off the ground. We view it from a distance of 17,000 years in the moment that a crack in the stone lets a sliver of light seep in. This light illuminates the crystalline deposits on the walls, layers that have built up for millennia. This light, sizzling through the crack, lands on the horse's hoof with a power so intense, sparks ignite like firecrackers, activating a crystal underneath. What happens next might stun even those who believe in magic. The crystal, green as an emerald, dislodges from the rock, ricochets across the cave, and falls to the floor. It twists itself, stretching like hot blown glass into the shape of a U, a horseshoe that will change the world. We are not told how it makes its journey around the circle of the earth, touching all the hemispheres from east to south, north to west, gathering the wisdom of nature, the codes that live in rivers and rock, trees and wind, and the fire of the sun. No human force carries this crystal until it makes its way into the hands of chosen guardians, women who understand the plant and animal kingdoms, secrets and symbols from gods and goddesses, myths and lore that evolve over time. We meet up with it again in North America in the 21st century. This talisman, called the crystal horseshoe, named by Gaia, goddess of the earth, is under the protection of Sophia Rose. Now, Sophia Rose in the next scene is standing on Mount Shasta, cleansing this horseshoe, and a storm comes and breaks it into 6 pieces, and one of the pieces is stolen. And that's what the girls are looking for. So it's been a journey for me. It's been a great honor to write a book like this. I'm working right now on adapting it to a television limited series. I'm not attached. I mean, if it happens, fantastic. It would be wonderful. And if it doesn't, I'm okay with that. And I know that, there are a lot of books that come out every year. 1 million books come out every year. And I know that, this inspires young readers a lot, and their moms. And it's been a wonderful piece of joy for me to share. So thank you for listening.